Okay, I think we're going to get this party started. And there will be some latecomers coming in from the board meeting and hopefully from outside. I apologize, you're going to be stuck hearing me quite a bit in this introduction because our chair, Zoe, is not available. So I'm taking her part of the script as well. So I'd like to welcome you all tonight. I'm Sharon Brodkey, and I'm honored to serve as the Executive Director of the Jewish Federation of Omaha's Jewish Community Relations Council. JCRCs are known as their community's conveners. We are guided by Jewish values. We advocate, educate, collaborate, and mobilize. We are dedicated to working in common cause to enhance cooperation with other religious, racial, ethnic, and civic groups to foster a just, democratic, and pluralistic society, as well as promote the security of Israel and Jews everywhere. I am so excited to honor and welcome you into our home, this Jewish Community Center campus, where all are welcome. Before we begin, I'd like to invite Pastor Bruce Williams from Omaha's Hope of Glory Church to join me for an opening prayer. This is something that every week at the Empowerment 360 meetings, Pastor Bruce or one of his colleagues opens our sessions with an opening prayer. So, Pastor.
Well, good evening, everybody. Just want to thank Sharon for inviting me out to be a part of this and to bless this event. So let's go ahead and pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this event, and we thank you for all that are here tonight with hearts that are united together and knitted together, and particularly for this. And particularly for our communities, for the efforts that are going on in our city. We thank you for what the Jewish Community Center is doing and bringing all people together. And we just thank you for it. Now, we just ask that you would bless the speakers, that you would bless this event, and that you would just do what you do, Father God. What you do is you bless us as we pay attention to you. And so we just thank you for what you're going to do tonight. Amen.
Thank you, Pastor. And on this special evening, we also say a prayer in our Jewish community that's been said for over 1,500 years. It's called the Shechianu. We invoke it to celebrate special occasions and to express our gratitude to God for new and unusual experiences. And I can't think of a more appropriate place to say this. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, shehechianu v'kiyamanu v'higianu lezman hazeh. And the translation is, Blessed are you, Adonai our God, sovereign of all, who has kept us alive, sustained us, and brought us to this moment. This moment, this community conversation, is a new beginning. It's one that is long overdue and absolutely necessary. In our Jewish community, we've been in conversation for several years as we have both watched and experienced events that have rocked our country, our city, and other communities. Internally, we've learned that we have a lot of work to do to make our Jewish spaces, our places of worship, and our shared communal institutions like this Jewish Federation and JCC more welcoming and inclusive spaces. We've had reckonings, and we've had to take responsibility for individual and institutional failings. We know we can be better, and to that end, we are joining the Jewish Federations of North America in their JEDI initiative, which is Jewish Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Program. We are also calling this evening Rekindle for a reason. We are going to be launching, we were going to wait until the end and do a kind of something big and splashy on this, but unfortunately our Rekindle co-chair has got to be someplace else and we didn't want to wait. So I'd like to invite Bobby Brumfield up to the podium to talk about our Rekindle initiative.
Good evening, everyone. All right. So our nation is undergoing a radical awakening around racial and social justice, but there is still so much more to do to bring equity to American society. That work can only be done by fostering new collaborations between communities. The American Black, predominantly Christian, and predominantly white Jewish communities have a commitment to social justice and unique strengths and assets in organizing and mobilizing community members around critical issues. However, because of physical and spiritual segregation, the two communities often work in parallel rather than in partnership. The disconnection between the Black and Jewish communities has much to do with the structural racism in America. However, our two communities have unique assets and strengths, and we should fight for a more equitable America together. To eliminate hatred in and between our communities, we need to increase individual connections, dialogue, and understanding. Rekindle's mission is to create meaningful social change by bringing emerging leaders from the Black and Jewish communities together for thoughtful and challenging dialogue, face-to-face interactions, breaking down barriers, building new relationships, and collective action. By rekindling the strong relationships and collaborative action between the Black and Jewish communities that were built during the Civil Rights Movement, we can accelerate our collective impact and increase equity. Connecting rising leaders from both communities through Rekindle's formal, thoughtful format not only builds new relationships, but will also spur action, cooperation, and collaboration in ways that will have a real and sustained impact. This is also critical to engaging the next generation of Jewish leadership who can live their Jewish values through working to repair a broken world. We will be sharing more about the Rekindle initiative, the application process, actual dates and logistics for the months to come. Keep an eye on JewishOmaha.org and the Omaha Star, and we will be doing outreach through other organizations in our community. Until then, if you would like to get involved or have any further questions, please feel free to reach out to me personally or to Sharon and Pam at the JCRC. I'd like to thank you all for coming out. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to take off, but be safe on your journeys home tonight. Thank you very much.
Okay, now you're stuck with me again because Zoe's not able to be here. So it is my privilege to welcome our third community conversation, this one dedicated to rekindling, reopening conversations, sharing stories, making new friends, and finding opportunities for our communities to share space and make Omaha more inclusive, welcoming, equitable. We are fortunate to launch this series of community conversations with two women who share some very impressive roles and responsibilities, who have ascended to career heights, who manage critical communication channels that help us understand our communities and our world. But before I get into the formal introductions, we did have some note cards and some pens available as you came into the theater. We'll bring them in. I noticed that some of you didn't grab them. Please make notes during the presentation if you have any questions that you'd like to ask our panelists later. We'll collect those cards and we will engage in a Q&A. No topic is off limits, but we do ask that you exercise respect in crafting your questions. There's also a QR code on the leaflet outside on the table. We would love to get your feedback as we plan our ongoing upcoming Black-Jewish dialogue community conversations. And finally, on behalf of Zoe, I want to thank you for joining us this evening. We hope that this is the beginning of something very special and meaningful, and we are pleased that you are here to be a part of it. Now, the introductions. Terri Sanders is the publisher of the Omaha Star newspaper, a weekly community newspaper. She is a communicator with a passion for moving the needle forward in her community. She also serves a dual role as the executive director of the Mildred D. Brown Memorial Study Center, a 501c3 organization. We are also exceedingly proud of her offspring, who is representing Omaha in Washington and other places. You done good. Annette van de Kamp-Wright is the editor of the Jewish Press. She was born and raised in the Netherlands and moved to the U.S. in 1996. Since 2002, she's lived in Omaha with her husband and 2 children. She is the editor and agency director for the Jewish Press, an over 100-year-old weekly Jewish community newspaper. She is a journalist and artist and brings a different perspective and lens to the problems and questions regarding racial equity and inclusion and justice. Our moderator this evening, Marty Shukert, is an Omaha city planner and has been involved in the planning and revival of the city since 1976. As head of the Omaha Planning Department, the city developed the ConAgra campus and Heartland of America Park, the new riverfront area, several North Omaha housing initiatives, and Omaha's recreational trails system. In 1989, Marty joined RDG as a planning consultant and continues his work in several significant projects throughout the Midwest region. Ladies and gentlemen, Marty, it's all yours.
Well, thanks, Sharon. Well, I'm going to start with an easy question. In Omaha, the Jewish and Black communities have been intertwined in one way or another for the last 100 to 120 years. As both groups migrated to the Midwest and to Omaha, they found themselves in the same geographic area, mainly because they were not allowed to move anywhere else. So both Jews and Blacks wound up in
we refer to as the near north side. Now we generally know as North Omaha. My father, for example, went to school with icons in the Black community like Charles Washington. They were friends from the time they were children. And obviously in the last decades, things have changed. Evolution and sometimes devolution has happened. So my first question is, where are we now as far as 2 communities in Omaha? Where are we now in terms of how they relate to one another, to how they communicate, to what that relationship, which was once a very close one, geographically and in a lot of ways culturally as well. Where does that relationship stand now?
So I just learned some things listening to you, but I don't think the relationship is as strong, if at all, because when you have been structured to live together, you have no choice. Now everyone is all spread out wherever they're going, and so that doesn't exist. So where you used to go to school with people, now you don't. So I think that rekindle is a very strong word because the fire's gone out.
Mm-hmm. Annette?
So my perspective is always colored by the fact that I'm not from here. And I might repeat that too many times tonight. But it's important because I come from a country where there is racism for sure, but at the same time there is so much mixing. My kids always notice when we go home to the Netherlands how many mixed couples they see on the street. Just the street looks different. You walk around Amsterdam, you see every color, every shade, every religion, every type of dress. You hear every language you can think of. So it is impossible to function. You have to go live deep, deep in the forest by yourself to avoid having multiple relationships. And I think a lot of times when I hear especially Black-Jewish relationships discussed in America in this landscape, is that we talk about it as if there are 2 separate groups. And when are those 2 groups going to meet? And that is not how communities relate to each other. If we keep waiting for 2 unique communities to meet in the middle, it's about the interpersonal relationships, one person at a time. your child who is black goes to school with a child who's Hispanic, who goes to school with a child who's Asian, who goes to school with a child who may be Mormon or Catholic, or you name it, whichever background, whichever national origin, whichever color we are. Those personal relationships are what's going to make the difference. I'm saying this in a very self-serving manner because that's what Terri and I are trying to do.
Right.
So you mentioned it's about relationship
It's about being personal
and being personal,
and not seeing you as a black woman.
right?
And
Just a
that,
person.
you know, beginning and end.
Mhm.
You are Terri. You are a newspaper editor. You know, what's your favorite color? What's your favorite food? Where shall we go shop?
Mhm.
What kind of movie would you like to go see with me?
Mhm.
You know, who are you as a person beyond just what people see on the outside? I don't want to be seen as just a Jew, the end. There's so much more to me than that.
Right.
And I imagine you feel the same way.
Sure.
So.
There is so much more, and the question is, because
Well, that's better.
Yay, it worked.
in my pocket.
Yes, you can clap for that.
Yes.
Thank you, Nicholas.
Yes, thank you. The question is, who starts the conversation and who continues it? I know last year, was it about this time?
I
That
can
we
honestly
started the
not
letter?
remember when we had.
I don't remember. But we started letter to a friend. And was it Pam that initiated it?
I think it was still severe.
Okay.
Yeah, somebody over at what was then.
Whoever it
I don't
was.
remember. Whoever, yeah.
We wrote a letter to each other.
And then we had a conversation.
And then we had a conversation, and we put those letters in each other's paper. And then we had a conversation, and we talked, and now we're back.
Yeah.
And that basic conversation will lead to a deeper relationship that we each have to pursue because we're busy. Yeah.
A little bit, yeah. So I always think, you know, we're talking about rekindling relationships, whatever we call it. Relationships don't happen during the big events. It's not what
Right.
happens during the big life cycle events or the big deals. They happen in between almost on accident.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I have been talking about is, you know, this is great. It's great to be on this, well, it's moderately great to be on the stage from my perspective, to be honest. But, you know, you build relationships by eating together.
Mm-hmm.
We should get into each other's kitchen and cook.
Okay.
You know, we should send stupid texts
True.
to each other in the middle of the night. We should go see a movie together and then discuss how much we hated it. We should talk about music.
Because
No.
that's what friends do.
That's how you build friendships, yes.
Yes.
So what's your favorite color?
Black?
Mine is pink.
Oh. Well, I have mine on.
You can pluck that apart as much
Yeah.
as you want.
So,
Marty's like, you left me out.
I think that something that you have hit on is the importance of informal, non-intentional relationships. I remember thinking a few years ago, it may have even been the last time we were in New York City, which was pre-COVID, being on the subway when people were still riding the subway because they weren't afraid of getting sick. Hopefully that's coming back a bit. And marveling at the diversity of people riding the subway, that there are people, again, like in Amsterdam, of all colors and, understandably all religions and all levels of whatever. And they're all there. They're not necessarily communicating, but they're there on an informal basis. And I think I know the question. I know how I would answer this, but that's something that's easier said than done. And in a city that is geographically dispersed like Omaha, and to be honest, highly segregated, That's a
then you'll
very
have way too
difficult,
much space.
we have too much space.
There is too
Yeah.
much space in Omaha. It just spreads and spreads, and then people complain about mountain lions in the backyard.
Yeah,
That's true.
yeah,
Whereas
You need
in
to
New
build
York,
out.
there's no space.
there's no space.
Same
You
thing in my
have to
country.
get together.
Yeah, but how do we? What is the? We are in an age where our two groups might be motivated to try to break that down to a greater degree, to try to structure more informal meetings, more informal relationships, because to be honest about it, we have common enemies.
That we do.
So how do we deal with that? I mean, what are the different perspectives that we could bring in this kind of partnership? Can that kind of a partnership, which is in some ways a negative one, responding to a threat, be something that could be made more organic and natural and become an opportunity?
I think it goes back to what Annette said, forging informal relationships, doing things intentionally, but not forced. So I have a favorite dish, whatever that might be, and I'll say, you know what, I think I'm going to make that this weekend. So I call you and say, you want to come over and watch me make this and have some when I'm done?
And I will say yes.
Of course. Who doesn't want to come eat? And then vice versa, same thing. And it's about, to me, it's about intention. Because we talk about being busy, but you know what? You do what you want to do when you want to do it. And I think that is very, very important. What is the intention?
And where do we set our priorities?
Right.
Like, because you're right, no matter how busy we are,
We
there
do
are
it.
things that we can still squeeze in when we are really motivated to do so. So how do we prioritize? What do we prioritize, and who do we prioritize? And I really don't like to say that word 3 times in a row.
Yeah. I don't like to hear it 3 times in a row.
Too many R's.
But you know, another factor is the fact that you were not born in this country. So then what are the nuances between cultures, not just religions? But that's a whole cultural piece.
Well, it's interesting because I would go back in a way to biblical traditions, that both blacks and Jews have experiences with slavery.
Okay.
And I actually do believe that the early Jewish involvement during the civil rights movements was really rooted in that.
That commonality.
In that commonality, in the very often stated commandment in the Torah that you shall not enslave another person. Remember that you were slaves in the land of Egypt.
Okay.
That collective memory in time, and the Jewish experience really is one of compressing time. Jews are sort of and I think blacks too, are sort of the fundamental time travelers of living in different eras at the same time.
But then you have the additional element of the fact that when the civil rights movement was big and robust and in the news in the 60s, there were way more people who had active memories of the Holocaust.
Right.
Because you're talking about slavery. We're not always talking about slavery in Egypt. That is, for a lot of people, still a very theoretical idea. But slavery camps during the Second World War, that's a more recent memory. And you look at the 60s, that memory was a lot more fresh than it is nowadays. You know, we say we don't forget, but we do.
So that brings up something brings something to mind for me. Our histories in the Black culture, and maybe in the Jewish culture too. It's a griot, G-R-I-O, the storyteller in the culture. And I think that because of technology, we have lost some of that. Children scroll. They're always scrolling. Phones, tablets, whatever it is. And I just heard recently a second grade teacher talking about students who did not like to read in the second grade. And she figured out because they didn't know how to turn a page. Think about that. I'm reading, I get to the end, I turn the page. I'm reading on a tablet, and I'm scrolling. And students don't use workbooks anymore. They have worksheets. So when your paper is done, it's done. You turn it in. It's not like the book, you know, you had a workbook, turn to page 10 and do 10 through 12. They don't do that. And so I equate that to the storytelling aspect. And maybe you went to grandma's house for dinner on Sunday and she told you about her childhood. Grandma's on a trip now. She's on a cruise, and you're not going to grandma's house on Sunday. And so that piece is lost. And can we regain it? Maybe, if grandma comes off the cruise. But if grandma is all about, well, I'm going to live my life now. And I think that is something culturally, the self-care. Doing what you enjoy doing, which may not necessarily be the mandate, but it's more selfish. And so when we are selfish, what do we lose? What are we losing culturally to give to the next generation?
Losing the ability to tell stories.
Yeah.
So I love that you're bringing that up, because when I was a kid, we would, Friday afternoon, we would go to my grandparents, my mom's parents. And my mother had 4 sisters, and everybody would come home. Me, my cousins, this was the 70s, so the children were mostly ignored once we went through the front door. And the adults all had fun together, and there were big family dinners, and it was messy, and they would put the kids all to sleep in my grandparents' bed at some point, and then later they would move you, and you would wake up on the couch or on the floor or in the easy chair if you were lucky. And it was this tiny, tiny downtown inner city house that now I look back, I cannot believe we all fit. But you found things out by hiding under the dining room table.
And listening.
While the adults were playing cards and talking.
Right.
And drinking lots of wine. And that's how I learned lots of things, by listening to the adults telling stories.
And so it was intentional that you all went to grandma's house on Friday.
Every Friday.
Every Friday. So I have 2 grandchildren, one 7 and one almost 9. The 9-year-old is a girl, the 7-year-old is a boy. I, at one point in my life, was a seamstress, so I sewed. And one year for her birthday, I took a big hamper and I decorated t-shirts and made skirts to match. And she just was pulling things out, and she kind of got tired, like, is there a bottom to this? Her dad bought her a sewing machine for Christmas in hopes that she would learn to sew. Well, men buying sewing machines, I don't recommend it. It didn't have a pedal. It didn't have a pedal. It had batteries, no cord. And when I opened it, I'm like, how is this supposed to run?
What was it?
It was a little sewing machine,
Was it like one of those toy, like an easy bake oven, but in a sewing machine?
Yes, kind of, sort of. But then I got on Amazon and found the same machine, but it came with a foot pedal, an extra thread and scissors, a whole sewing kit. So I bought that. And when she came over, she looked, she says, "But what about the sewing machine Daddy bought?" I said, "You know what, it doesn't work. We're going to use this over here." And so, but we talked about being busy and being intentional. I have to intentionally make that time to want to teach her to sew. I have 2 daughters who know nothing about it. But now they had lots of dresses that their mother made. One cooks, the other one doesn't. Imagine which one who has the nails and is on TV. She's not a cook. She's not a cook. But when she was getting married, and we went dress shopping once, and then she found a dress with her friends. And when she went back to the seamstress, this dress didn't fit anywhere. Too tight, too this, too that. She called me in tears. "Mommy, I need you to come." "Come and do what? I can't do anything with that." I said, "As a matter of fact, get your money back, because that lady can't put enough inserts in there to make that fit." And I was going to a conference in New Orleans. Remember this summer when all of the flights were canceled arbitrarily and people were stuck in places?
Yes.
I was stuck in Washington, D.C. I had come from New Orleans. We went to the second place where she found a dress, and she walked in. "My mother is a seamstress, and she needs to see this dress." And I'm like, and I think she called, and the lady that was responsible for making the dress, that was her day off. Her fiance told her, "Just get a dress." And that almost ended that. But we went, and I said, "Let's just go." And we got there, and the lady said, "I heard it was you," and I came in. Saying all that to say that you have to show up when you're needed. And my husband passed away 6 years ago. And whenever the grandchildren came over, I was good at getting them there, but I wasn't trying to do anything. I would turn them over to him, and he would take them for a walk, and he'd go in the kitchen and eat ice with them. And he said to me one day, "You know, you get them over here and then you disappear." And I said, "Yeah, I do. I'm sorry." But when he passed away, I thought about it, and I said, I am the only paternal connection that my grandchildren have. So I have to make sure that I make myself available. And I told their mother, I said, "Now, I'm not your typical grandmother. I have a schedule, and you need to get on it. Don't call me and 10 minutes will be there, because I'm not going to be there. You need to schedule your visits." And my granddaughter will call me, and she'll say, "Nana," because that's what I'm called. "Do you have a meeting?" "No." "Do you have a talk you have to go to?" "No." "Are you in your office?" Sometimes I say yes, sometimes I say no.
Do
I'm
you
not always
sometimes
truthful.
lie?
I do. I'm not always truthful. Hey, it's my world, right? And so I talked to her this weekend, and I said, "You know what? I have something to do Monday, but Tuesday you can come over and we're going to work on your sewing machine." She said, "Great." Her mother texted me today and said, "I have a lot to do on Saturday and something to do Saturday evening. Can she come over after her volleyball game?" See, schedule. Mother recognizes schedule. And I said yes. And I went to my calendar and marked out that whole day. And she called tonight when I was on my way here. And she said, "Well, Nana, am I coming over tomorrow?" I said, "No." "What?" I said, "No, because you're going to spend all day Saturday with me after your volleyball game." And she was like, "Oh." Well, can I come Friday night? Nope, I got something to do Friday night. Let's not push it. And so that's intentionality.
It's a change, though, because I notice it with my mother, who, of course, lives abroad. When I call her and let her know that I book a flight and I give her the dates, she is almost apologetic in the sense that she will, I mean, we have to schedule it because I have to fly.
Right.
But she will say, I have something on this day, and this day is my choir, and this day I have a dinner with a friend. Like, she apologizes. She's like, I'm sorry,
I'm busy.
Mom, I'm coming for 2 weeks. I don't expect you to be not doing anything during those 2 weeks.
But she cherishes that 2 weeks.
She feels like she needs to apologize.
So let me ask you a question.
The conversation is interesting, and it raises a question in my mind. As I look at the audience tonight, and this is not a surprising thing at all, the audience is probably somewhere above the median age of the United States.
Seasoned.
What?
They're seasoned.
Seasoned audience. But in some of my more recent work in North Omaha and some of the work that we're doing, there's definitely been a new leadership that has evolved in North Omaha that are really arts-oriented, creative, really exciting people, and you can see this on 24th Street, of people kind of taking the traditional neighborhood and really turning it into something cool. For many years that was not happening, and it's wonderful to see. There are people, young people of the same age in the Jewish community who are coming from a different perspective, but never the twain shall meet, as it were. That those younger groups are really often separate worlds, even more so than the baby boomers might be, who still have memories and involvement in marches, in demonstrations, in the things that were happening during the 1960s and 1970s, and I would put myself in that in that category. So again, everybody is busy and off in their own directions, but how do you get a younger generation who have a lot in common but are off in very different directions and operating in really parallel universes? How do you make some kind of chemistry happen there among these two groups?
Do you find a commonality? You just mentioned art. So I think about poetry, and there's something called Louder Than a Bomb. Are you familiar with that? So these two parallel universes come together at an event. The commonality is poetry. And I listen to yours, you listen to mine. How do you do this so that they go together and not missing? I don't know. I just thought I'd mention.
It's a very interesting idea.
So I'm thinking of, so my daughter takes literature classes at Metro.
Okay.
And they do poetry nights and
How old
public.
is she?
She's 21.
Okay.
Public reading nights where the students, they are in a classroom together. They don't all write poetry at the same time. They don't all write fiction at the same time. They don't all write lyrics at the same time. Everybody writes their own thing, and then they read it out loud to each other during public reading nights. And I went to one of them, and it is fascinating to watch the mixture of different cultures and different voices.
Which campus?
Expose each other. I think she has most of her classes on North Campus, but sometimes she goes to the South one.
That's just interesting, because she could have been in Elkhorn. And what are the chances
They
that the
have
cultures
some
mix?
yeah, she
That's
likes
why
the
I
North
asked.
Campus. My husband used to teach there, so that's where they're more familiar.
Okay.
But so listening to each other's voices, what I noticed was it's not just that you're listening to the words themselves, but there is more than that. Like, there was one kid whose poetry is very much, there is this rhythm to it, and you could almost put it to music.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt when I was listening to him, like I wanted him to make it into a song.
sing.
Yeah, it
Right.
was. And then there was another kid that gets up there and says, okay, mine is a little bit different. I'm going to start with singing and then I will talk. And he did.
Mm-hmm.
And he sang because he felt that when he was writing it, it turned into more of a song lyric.
Like you thought the first one should have.
Yes. And then my daughter does her fiction, which is a completely different area. They hear each other's stories and they hear each other's voices and each other's technologies because they're all interested in writing.
Mm-hmm.
They're interested in creating something, and they all write completely different things. But they happen to be in a classroom together. How do you recreate that? How do you get to be intentional about that?
Well, it's such an interesting idea because it's getting people together on something other than commiserating about who hates both of us. You know, it's an idea that's based on positive experience and
that
positive
is something we
creativity.
need to talk about.
It's something we
because
need to talk about.
Because we do spend a lot of time talking about what we have in common on the tragedy front.
Yes, exactly.
And we can certainly talk about that all night, but we all have positive stories.
So should there be a joyous night? A
Yes.
night of joy?
I like that.
And you only tell the fun stuff? Because I know we all have something fun and interesting.
I think it's an and.
Okay.
It's both those things.
So shameless plug, when the Omaha Star was started by Mildred Brown in 1938, she told the good news. And so that is the theme of the paper. Not who robbed the bank, not who the police chased, not whose dog bit a cat, but who got a scholarship, who is writing a book, who is new in the city as far as persons or personalities or leaders. And so
That's still very noticeable. You feel that when you read the paper. If you don't have a subscription, get one.
there's papers out in the hall.
It's a great paper.
And there's little grace subscription forms out in the hall, and if you give them to Pam, she'll see that I get them. But it is sometimes tough, especially nowadays, to find good news. I listened to something today, it was a podcast on a station called The Griot. That's what made me think about that. And it was about Black writers. And the interviewer talked to them about what they had been writing and then how they write. What techniques do they use? Somebody was using AI.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh, I wonder, can I write a story with AI? Not. But
Read the New York Times today about the AI interview.
ooh,
Yeah.
was it not good?
Frightening.
Okay, yeah. And I tried it once. I said, write an introduction for Terri Sanders. And I waited, and something popped up. And for the most part, it was pretty accurate. I was impressed. But I would not recommend writing a paper like that or writing an interview like that to fake it.
It's very dystopian.
Yes.
I find it almost like it reads like an opening scene of a Stephen King novel.
Mm-hmm.
Like it starts off all shiny and new, and then it goes horribly wrong.
Yes, it's like bzz, right off the edge of the cliff.
Right.
But I think that if we had a in this community conversation a good night.
Yeah.
And I think that it's a good point, because I struggle with it when we try in our paper to have mostly local news, but that doesn't always cover all the pages. So when I have room left over, I plug in news from The Wire.
Sure.
And I have days where I'm very tempted to just scroll through until I find a positive story, because today was actually a day like that when I looked on the Jewish Telegraphic Agency is syndicated Jewish news that we subscribe to, and it's anti-Semitism in Europe, and it's anti-Semitism in Israel, and it is settlers having a riot, and persons getting shot, and it's this and that, and there was a big piece about the Day of Hate, which apparently was celebrated last Saturday. There is so much negative news out there. I can fill every paper from front to back with only negative stories.
Good news about the Day of Hate was that it completely fizzled.
Yeah, well, it was our third one.
Yeah.
Did you know
my.
that? I did not know that. I heard that last Friday that we've already had 2 this calendar year. Did you know that, Terry?
No, I didn't know that at all.
There's a whole mathematical, explanation of why they have to have a certain numbers of days of hate.
Oh.
So, in getting to this age of digitalness, last November I started a podcast. It's called the Omaha Star Morning News Bites. Bite being a little bit, not a lot. 3 minutes or less, usually less. I tell you the day of the week, the date, what the temperature is going to be, when the sun is going to set. And then a lot of times I look for the national days. So today is National Strawberry Day.
Who knew?
Who knew?
There is also a National Cake Day.
Yes,
I don't
and there's
know why
a
I
National
know that,
Pie
but-
Day and a National Pizza Day. And last week it was National Pistachio Nut Day. And if you don't like pistachio nuts, you should buy a bag and give it to someone who does.
Do you like pistachio nuts?
No, I do not.
All right, so you're
We're not
Marty's
supposed
you're
to get off
talking
task
about
like this.
You're talking about national days and weeks is bringing me to a Tom Lehrer song.
Okay.
Tom,
Are you gonna sing it?
National Brotherhood Week.
Yes.
So Tom Lehrer, for those of you who are too young to know, was
I don't know who that is.
You don't know who Tom Lehrer was.
I do not know.
He's
Was.
a Jewish math adjunct professor at Harvard in the 1970s who wrote satirical songs.
Okay.
But songs with a real bite. And I was a bit of a Tom Lehrer fan. In fact, have a collection of everything he ever wrote or sang. And so one of his songs was National Brotherhood Week.
Okay.
And the theme of National Brotherhood Week, and it's a very funny song, is that there's 1 week in the year that everybody loves each other, and then the other 51 they go back to hating each other again.
All righty then.
Yeah,
I say that's a win,
yeah.
You get one week at least,
at least.
minimum.
Yeah,
But you can
yeah.
find
And one of the lines
good.
is the white folks hate the black folks, and the black folks hate the white folks, and and somebody, and everyone hates the Jews.
Wow. That's a little dark.
Yeah, it was, but the point being, how do you routinize that? How do you we can have an event, but as I think you implied so well, Terry, that the contact's got to be ongoing. It can't be one off.
Can't be a one-off. It has to be ongoing. It has to be organic.
It has to be organic. Yeah.
Has to be organic.
Mostly organic. at
Mostly
least, yeah.
organic. I mean, you can schedule.
We can push a little bit.
You can schedule, but you can't construct what happens. And I think that is important. Just like I found my way here. And I had not been before to this beautiful campus. I was over on the other side where the churches are. And I'm like, wait a minute, this is not working. And I had the GPS on, but of course I was on the phone, so I wasn't getting the directions. But as soon as I hung up, boom. And so I found my way here intentionally to be here for tonight at this time. There needs to be a dialogue in North Omaha intentionally at a planned time. You can't plan what we'll talk about because we didn't. I mean, we had a conversation about what we could talk about.
Yes.
And I don't know that we even got to that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think we did. We had a conversation about where we came up with questions, which we completely ignored tonight. Yeah.
Yes, yes. But it's all good. Uh-oh.
Wanted to see if anybody had any questions for us.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. I was like, Pam's coming with the broom.
No, I'm not trying to do anything.
Sweeping us off.
Does anybody have any questions that they want to ask the panel? Go ahead.
Years ago, there was, I don't remember the name of this program, but there was a program where people could sign up to have dinner with each other in different parts of the city.
Mm-hmm.
And I wondered, okay, there was this program, it was years ago, where you could sign up and different people from different areas and different types could get together, and they got together and they had meals together. So I wondered about that. How did that work, number one, and could something like that happen again? Because that's at that informal level you were talking about.
Right. So
Susan,
we're
I
putting
saw
you
you
on the
nodding.
commission, putting you on the committee, first of all.
I'm looking for stuff. I'm going to retire.
Okay.
Do you remember what that was?
What was it? Okay. That sounds familiar.
Yeah, and, okay.
And that
thank
wasn't that long ago, was it?
you. No.
15 years ago.
Ooh. Okay, that was a long time ago. Sounded more familiar than that.
15 years is not that long.
Oh, okay. Depends on where you sit.
Yeah.
My question is, I'm in the belief of it needs to start with our children. So what could we do with our children that would, plant the seed? And what kind of activities would they be able to do together? My wife works for North Star Foundation.
Okay. I've been there.
I've been there too.
Okay.
Fabulous place.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that the elementary school started doing was they had like a book club.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, I don't know, 8 kids, and they read a book, and then they have a discussion about it all up at North Star. Is there something we could be doing even at a younger age? I mean, we have an ELC here, an Early Learning Center,
Okay.
with kids that are, well, from 18
months
6
old?
weeks.
18 months all the way to 5.
4 years old.
Okay.
Right. It's a preschool.
Preschool.
It's a preschool. Is there something, can we do something that would, with those kids that would be worthwhile to start breaking down some of these things?
Have you ever seen children play together?
Yeah.
And children don't know anything about race. They don't know anything about class. They don't know, or if they do, they don't pay any attention to it, especially the younger they are. They just get in there, it's sand, it's a box, let's get in the sandbox, let's throw water. You see that when you go to the Children's Museum. All the little kids are in the water, just splishing and splashing and not paying any attention. And maybe it is and I hate to call it a diversity day, but that's what the parents would bring the children to, a diversity day at the Children's Museum. And you don't have to force it, because the kids will play together. And maybe the children playing together and the parents sitting on the bench, that's how you make all that work together. So I'll call the lady at the Children's Museum.
I remember some of the questions that we talked about.
Uh-oh.
And I think some of it, and to your point, Terry, that we need to bring the next dialogue to a different venue, and which we want to do. Marty, can you talk a little bit about what we spoke about last week regarding transportation and the geographic, the redlining, and what can we do maybe as communities in common cause to address some of the geographic segregation that's so prominent in this community that doesn't exist in larger cities, or at least there are more opportunities in larger cities for that organic interaction to start happening.
There aren't very many cities that aren't segregated. This one, if you look at segregation indexes, Omaha's extraordinarily high, but we may be beaten by Chicago, and that's about it. And it's hard to tell at this point whether it's economic or racial segregation or some combination of the two. But I think and it's sort of beyond my power, anybody's power to deal with this. But there are things that people did in communities together, such as travel to work on public transportation, which I mentioned earlier, in a more compact city, that encouraged routine contact. And much of what we're talking about today really is ultimately routine contact. It's something that makes us comfortable with each other. And a device like the car, which we all use by default, is an inherently isolating experience. We're in our cocoon, and getting into the car in the garage, except for a few of us who actually park outside because we only have one-car garages, but and move in this kind of an isolated environment. We do have environments that do allow sort of informal, unplanned interaction, parks or trails or examples of those. But even those are geographically separated. And it's hard to. Omaha was, as were most cities, redlined. There's no question about it. Redlining means that there are areas that were drawn around
with a red
neighborhoods
line.
With a red line, saying that mortgage loans made in these areas are too risky to make. And so as a result of that, people in North Omaha were not able to get financing for home purchases or for home rehabilitation, and disinvestment accelerated. But that, of course, is illegal now. Legally illegal, or so they say.
Officially, yeah.
But even at that, there's still structural things that if not intentionally create redlining conditions. For example, an appraisal on a house in North Omaha is going to be less than an appraisal on a house in a comparable neighborhood in West Omaha, and that's a problem, because then you can't get a loan for the cost of the construction of the house.
Right.
When I was with the city, we moderated that by doing a gimmick where we blended mortgage loans with community development block grant funds, and I thought that was one of the better things that we did that actually made home ownership available.
Sure.
Those things are structural. And you can't even blame anybody for it, because the fact that there's a differential price is in fact the result of endemic racism. I mean, it is, but it gets to be kind of a chicken and egg proposition, that the appraisal is lower because the sales values are lower, because the appraisals are lower, and so forth and so on down the line. So what do we do about that? I mean, there are significant development projects, and I would put Highlanders in that category, that are deliberately mixed income projects, and have developed a structure that's so full of amenities and so nice that it's in demand by people of any race or even income group. But not every project has Susie Buffett, who's plowing millions of dollars into this innovative development. It's got to happen in the regular routine market too.
There's also an elephant in the room, the fact that there are quite a few people out there who still benefit from that red line and who don't have a problem with it staying in place.
Yeah.
A friend of mine was shopping for a house, and she's on the phone with the real estate office, and she hadn't met this agent face to face, so the agent didn't know what she looked like. The agent suggested a listing and said it's a great neighborhood, if you know what I mean.
Ooh.
My friend is black, the neighborhood was all white.
Yeah.
And so she went with a different real estate agent. You know, there's others out there you can
options.
call. But it's those moments where you're like, wow, people are comfortable enough to say that on the phone.
Sure they are.
Are they saying
What
in
are they
code?
saying in private?
Yeah, exactly.
So I'm going to take it a step further. Now that we have had COVID and people became used to working remotely or working at home, now we don't even have to socialize at work.
I know, right.
I mean, I'm getting paid the same amount of money to work in my PJs. And people don't want to go back to an office. Offices have decided that we now don't have to rent space in an expensive building. It's fine to work remotely. So now where is your socialization coming from? Because we used to have to go to work. And that's how you got to know people.
That's right.
I would go mad if I had to work from home every day.
Oh, I would too. I
Like,
mean, during COVID, I left.
The people in this building is what, yeah, it's what makes it
We
worthwhile.
talked about that you came to work even though sometimes the lights weren't on,
Yes.
but you came. And where I was working at the time, they gave me the option. I was an office manager. And the person I worked for came in and said, well, are you okay being at work? I said, nobody's here but me. I said, but here's the key. I'm not going to answer your phone at my house. I'm not going to get your mail at my house, and I'm not going to write your checks from my table. I need to do that here. Now, I may not stay all day, and so, but you make those decisions, and if it's easier for you to stay home in your PJs, who's not going to stay home?
Only when the weather is really super bad.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, there
Then
is
I
that
will.
factor.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And that process is exacerbating separation among people who normally would not be separated.
Right.
And it's even worse where people have to make an effort.
It is.
Yeah, I mean, I think probably one of the most corrosive effects of COVID, despite the deaths have been awful, but the longest term impact is isolation, and
people are fine with it.
And people are fine with it,
which is sad.
And listening.
That is chilling. Yeah.
Yeah, and listening to what they want to listen to and the opinion that they want to listen to, and not going beyond that.
And so nobody questions that. Yeah.
So that makes the challenge of
even larger.
Routine contact and routine positive relationships and interactions even more difficult.
Or hearing things, or hearing adverse opinions to your own and causing you to consider someone else's opinion. All you got is a noise in your head.
Yeah. I use this quotation a lot, but there's a theoretical physicist named Geoffrey West, who's British, who's written several books, and I think he was featured in an article in the New York Times Magazine. There was one of the Ideas article. It's years and years old, and I keep carrying this old Times Magazine around. It's even older than the ones that hang around our house all the time. But he was talking about developing equations for cities and the quotation that I always use is his quotation that good city planning can be defined by actions that maximize positive interaction and minimize distress.
Distress?
Minimize distress. Maximize interaction and minimize distress. So distress being, obviously being anything, whether it's traffic congestion or fear of the person sitting next to you on a bus or on a subway or walking down the street versus routine positive interaction of pleasurable experiences. And to the degree that you can minimize one and maximize the other, that would be a good outcome.
And so how did he come up? What does that equation look like? That's what I'm wondering.
What does that equation look? The equation looks like the Leahy Mall opening last summer with kids of all colors being in this great public space playing on the play equipment there.
There you go. That's even better than the Children's Museum.
Yeah, or the Children's
Because it's
Museum.
outside.
Outside.
That's positive. That's positive interaction.
Okay.
Minimizing distress is making it easier, more comfortable for kids to walk across a street.
Or for their parents to find a parking space.
Or for their parents to park. Right. Yeah.
Lift up something that Terry said about the location of this event. I was looking up some statistics for a conversation a couple years ago, and I was surprised to find that, and this is probably within the last 10 years of the study was done, that the average African American family in Douglas County lives on about 30,000, less than 35,000 a year, and to have them come out to this area of town at 7 o'clock at night, the transportation's an issue. Do they have a car? They're not going to worry about whether they have a car to park their garage in, a garage to park their car in. They're going to worry about if they even have transportation. So I think you need to move the conversation to a different area of town if you want. This is a really white demographic, regardless of the age. That's my comment.
So I want to say something about that. So let's say we move the conversation, and obviously everybody in the room is interested in the conversation. And even Pastor Bruce is gone, isn't he? Okay. So we move the conversation, everyone here plus 2 people come, and there is no one from the area where the conversation is moved to, because do they understand, and I hate to say they because that sounds so, understand that there was a Black-Jewish allyship at one time?
Yeah.
You have to be of a certain age
To know that.
to know that. I
And
went
then
to
hope
Central
that the
High
pe-
School.
And then hope that the people of that certain age will bring their children and
Right.
so
Or
forth.
are they busy and they find something quote unquote better to do and don't come?
And maybe, you
And
know,
how disappointing is that?
and maybe we just have to get ready.
Thank you. I haven't written my publisher's pen yet, so that'll be something to talk about. Because this was planned quite a while ago, right? And I made a comment to someone today. They said, well, are you going to this meeting? I said, nope. And they said, well, why not? I said, because I'm going to something that was planned in advance. This just popped up. I'm going to stop doing pop-ups. People.
Oh, I even know what the meeting was.
You do.
It's the North Omaha, the ARPA.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
1024. Yes. the 1024 meeting.
It did just pop up.
It did just pop up. It popped up Saturday
Yeah.
for Monday.
That is too late.
It is, but in my community, meetings are pop-ups. They're not planned. I appreciate a plan. Obviously, I plan things with my granddaughter. I believe in calendars. Everybody doesn't believe in a calendar. And to speak to your point about that's something for me to write about, yes it is, and I will look forward to it.
There's a
But
question.
do the leaders understand, don't be popping stuff up, for lack of a better term?
Yeah, hi. I was wondering, what about getting some kids together, probably more high school and junior high kids, and having them under the guidance of some social workers on each side, work together to help the elderly with some tasks.
Mm-hmm. Isn't that called public service?
Yeah. Public service, social service.
Right. And that's a requirement in school, isn't it?
It still is.
Civics at Westside has some kind of thing that people do.
Okay.
We can have one more question and then I've got, to wrap up, I've got some announcements.
This is a question about publishing. Each of you publish a weekly newspaper addressed to a defined but different audience. What are the common problems you're both experiencing in publishing that newspaper? And what are the differences that you find, but maybe it's the same and you can help each other?
I'm glad you asked that question because it was exactly what I was going to ask.
So Annette said she has trouble finding sometimes good news.
Sometimes I do, yeah.
But you got to dig?
Yes.
Okay.
But only if I have a few holes to fill. Like the news from this community that we mostly focus on is almost always good news. We get a lot of stories in from the synagogues and from agencies and organizations about positive things that happen in our community. So it is when I end up with a few extra holes in the paper that I have to fill up with wire news. I would say deadlines, people not sticking to deadlines, is something we have in common.
Does that happen to you?
I know, right? It's, what else? Let's do a top three.
Deadlines.
People forgetting that when you write something on the opinion page, it is just one person's opinion.
Oh, I've never hit that
and
before.
they can't, yeah. You've never heard that?
Deadlines, no. I have never hit that. But deadlines I hit all the time. Or the people that have something that is really newsworthy, or an advertisement that is time sensitive.
You mean you can't go back in time and still put that in the paper, even
Doesn't
though
work
it's already
out.
been printed?
Or there's no room because the paper is a plan.
That is sometimes hard to explain to people, that a
I don't
page
even
is
try.
finite.
I don't even try.
And you cannot just squeeze it in, yeah.
Because when people call me and they say, well, can I get it in? I say, oh, I'm sorry, the deadline was the last Friday.
But can I still get it in?
No. And then they kind of pause.
The no is a difficult.
No is no.
Yeah, it's a difficult concept.
It's a boundary. We got to have boundaries. And I think that as a community paper to a specific community, people think you can always fudge them in.
True. Here's another one, and I'm going to make some people mad, but I didn't know that was happening, and it's literally been on the front page like 4 weeks in a row. Why didn't you put it in the paper?
It's like having a public meeting on a project, and you do everything you can possibly do to
get it out there.
To get it out there, and then somebody shows up at a city council meeting and says, "Well, I wasn't notified."
Do you read?
Well, this has really been a lot of fun. I'm going to ask people's indulgence with me for one second, because I think it's a reasonable way to end, and that is there's a mural up there that's 65 feet long that people sometimes look at and deliberately it's designed as an abstract, but actually what it is the first verse of the 133rd Psalm in Hebrew. And it says, Hine ma tovu ma na'im shevet achim gam yachad, and that means how good and how pleasant it is for people to dwell together as one. And it's really a lovely quotation and a lovely and a lovely thing for us to aspire to. Mm-hmm. We're not necessarily doing a very good job of it, but nevertheless,
something to
it's
shoot
something
for.
to
It's
shoot
a goal.
for. Yeah. So when people talk about the Word of God, there it is.
Mm-hmm. I like it.
So much for being here, and to our panelists. This is an ongoing conversation. We're going to continue it in different venues, multi-generational, multi-vocational, institutional, individuals, and just so that you get a sense, some of the ideas that have been exchanged tonight, which are very good, are going to fit very well into the Rekindle initiative, which we failed to kind of describe that to you. It's a cohort of Black and Jewish community members that there will be an application process for, and we will share that with Terri for the Star, and it'll be in Jewish publications as well. And this cohort commits to 12 hours of learning and sharing experiences and having honest, hard conversations about how we are as a community, where we got to this, how we got to this point, and how we move forward. And then at the end, each cohort sort of takes on a community service assignment or an advocacy type of assignment, whatever is within their wheelhouse, their area of interest, or whatever is important at the time to deal with. Thank you so much. So we're hoping that the cohort, and Bobby, who you met earlier, is going to be representing the Black community. We are looking for a co-chair, a Jewish co-chair. This has been done successfully in several other communities. Cleveland modeled it. It came out of the Leadership Cleveland chamber class. A young Black woman and a young Jewish guy who said, we need to do something to find organic opportunities, but that's not going to happen until we start finding ways to sit together and to dwell together and to have these conversations and develop these friendships and relationships. So that's what Rekindle is going to do. We're really excited about that initiative. They're giving it away, basically. They have not monetized this curriculum that they developed, and now it's being adopted all over the country. So we're really looking forward to putting that together. Hopefully the first cohort will happen this fall. Or that's what we're working toward. I want to thank you all again so much for coming out tonight, and we will start working on, outside, the little cards with the QR code, if you wouldn't mind taking one of those and filling out the survey, letting us know how we did, and we can use that information going forward with our planning for this series of community conversations and other topics. And have I left anything out important? Pam's the boss. She tells me we're okay. We're done. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.